All right, so could I get sort of a show of, like, everybody here is in involved in K-12, yes?
Yes.
Like what?
Middle school.
Middle school? Which one?
Kiewit Middle School.
Kiewit. Okay.
I taught at Kiewit for 12 years, and now I'm at a district position in Millard.
Okay.
I teach here in the teacher ed program.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. And,
I teach 5th grade at Cottonwood Elementary in Millard.
okay. Awesome. And you guys over on this side of the room? You? Anybody?
I teach 3rd grade in Millard.
Okay.
I teach 4th grade at OPS.
OPS. Which school in OPS?
Spring Lake.
Spring Lake. Okay.
I'm a math teacher, math coach at Spring Lake.
Okay. Nice. So also, this is elementary school, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's okay. So and back there, are you guys middle school, elementary school, high school?
Elementary.
Okay. Which?
Cottonwood.
Cottonwood. Okay.
Millard.
Okay. Because we're so a shameless sort of a tangent here plug. We are looking for elementary schools to partner with, especially for underserved populations, for an NSF grant. Elementary schools in particular, and we want to bring Bricklayer into the classroom and get funds to do that. So if you are interested in this, we have a couple of schools already, but we need to kind of start sitting down with the teachers and working out stuff with them, and it needs to happen soon because this thing is due like February 12th. So I have a card, if you want, please, but contact me soon, please. Okay. All right. Okay. So now back to the talk. All right. So I'll talk a little bit about Bricklayer, but basically what Bricklayer is, it's a system where you write programs that build Lego things, right? Lego artifacts or block-based Minecraft artifacts, things like this. So it's art and coding and math, right? So you're in discrete spaces, you have coordinate systems, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. And what you end up doing in Bricklayer a lot is you do a lot of visualization. You do a lot of spatial stuff. And anybody that gets into Bricklayer a little bit will tell you right away that this is what happens. And so there's a large body of research that shows that visual skills, visual abilities, spatial abilities, all this kind of stuff underlie math. That this is a prerequisite to advanced mathematical understanding. And it's huge. Spatial abilities are bigger predictors of success in all STEM disciplines than SAT scores. And so the body of evidence is huge. I don't want to talk too much about that, though it is a very interesting conversation, and I've talked about that in other talks. I will say a little bit about it, but first I'd like to say this is the website that you can go to. Everything on the website is free. I am the creator of Bricklayer. Let me give you a quick, I guess I won't go to the website for this one now. I'll go to the website later. But so that's the website. Here's sort of the little long sentence, if you will, of what Bricklayer is about. If you had to sort of summarize it in one long sentence, it would be this. Bricklayer is a set of apps, online tutorials, curriculum, and documentation that teaches mathematical thinking, computational thinking, and coding in an engaging manner using visual art as the medium. And so all of the things that you see here were created through Bricklayer programs. So Bricklayer ties in with Lego Digital Designer, which is freely available. It ties in with LDraw, it ties in with Minecraft, it ties in with 3D printers, and more recently the Arduino that's sort of under development at the moment. And so these images here, this 2-dimensional one, this is Elvis, thank you very much. Was created by a 3rd grader. This one was created by a non-artist who likes the Beatles, I'm guessing, as do I, and found this picture of John Lennon and put a grid on top of it and then turned it into pixel art. So creative solution to working around your artistic deficiencies through engineering, right? My daughter did that one. This one up there, this building up there is in Minecraft with texture packs and stuff. Does anybody recognize this building? This is a design off of a real building. This is the Centaurus building in Islamabad. So it's like a really, really cool building. And this is the Menger sponge, and this, of course, is the infamous Pokeball, right? So you can build all kinds of things in Bricklayer. And when you build these things, there is a whole bunch of visual stuff going on in your head. And we're trying to measure that. So we're at the early stages through efforts at the university to go through how do you measure this, these spatial abilities, and we would like to even better, we'd like to measure how does this impact math scores, like good old-fashioned NISA tests, this kind of stuff, right? But so here's sort of just one research activity that sort of has measured that when you do math, you engage the visual portions of your brain. And you can go on and on. So there's a mountain of evidence that says the pathway through advanced number ability, mathematical ability, is completely mediated by, this is a technical term, mediated by spatial abilities. So it is, I passionately believe this. There's a lot of research to back it up. And so, then you have sort of these interesting kinds of stories that Einstein said his thought processes were visually based. Right? He doesn't use words or symbols or this kind of stuff. It's all visual. And so, and he's not the only one, but we're in good company, right? If we feel that this is important, this spatial stuff, and I believe it is. And so what I'd like to do in this talk, rather than sort of give you, an overview of Bricklayer and stuff like that, and I can do maybe a little bit of this, but I'd like to kind of just sort of show you the kinds of mathematical, visual kinds of thinking that Bricklayer either directly engages in or helps you with. And then the next question is, well, so how does this connect with the math that's being tested, right? So that's sort of a topic for another talk, really. But this one is, let's just talk about how Bricklayer helps with this visual stuff. And so some of these pictures are inspired by, does anybody know this? Has anybody seen this movie? Doctor Strange? Really good, right? So anyway, so symmetry. So symmetry occurs in nature, right? It is not an accident when symmetry occurs, right? It is the chances of you just sort of throwing some pennies on the floor and having them arrange themselves in a symmetric structure is unlikely unless there's some force that's forcing this to happen. So for that reason, right, in science, people look for symmetry. They say, there's something underlying here that's making this happen. Here's a good one, right? Cut off one of the arms and see what happens, right? There is you must have symmetry in this thing, right? It doesn't work otherwise. So, and of course, if you take pictures and you create stuff, people a lot of times are drawn to symmetry, and sometimes they're drawn to asymmetric stuff too, if you want to, depending on the art effect that you want. But symmetry shows up in a lot of places, repeating things and so on, and it shows up in mathematics, right? So there's symmetry here. If I know what 5 times 6 is, and I've memorized this, I don't need to memorize what 6 times 5 is. And in fact, that's how I taught my daughter multiplication. I said, first, you got to know that multiplication is commutative, so we only have to learn a triangle. We only have to learn half of this table. So here's a symmetry question, right? So the letter H is symmetric with respect to 2 different lines. All right, vertical reflection symmetry and horizontal reflection symmetry. And now you need to find which of the following letters is symmetric with respect to at least 2 different lines. Did you find another one? So is it K? So it's X, right? And it's like, okay, so where'd you come up with this question? Here's another one. Not so visual, but the ideas are visual, but now we need to express them with numbers, right? So same kind of a thing. We have a point in a coordinate system. What is the new x value if this point is flipped across the line x equals 1? Right? So you're like, okay, so who cares about this stuff? Well, if you look closely, this is the SAT. Both of those questions came from the SAT. Right? So it is symmetry in mathematics and stuff. In fact, a lot of mathematicians will tell you it's all about patterns. Right? It's about recognizing patterns, expressing them. In fact, I would say that the only way that you leverage the power of the machine is by writing a small program that when it executes produces a large number of computational steps. And the only way that can happen is if there's some kind of a pattern going on. The only way to express that in a small program. So we can explore all of these ideas visually without numbers, right? And then we can talk about as a separate issue, so how do you express those terms numerically, right? I see those as two different things. And Einstein probably might agree with me, maybe, right, if he thinks visually. So maybe that's saying a little too much. But the point is, right, there is this distinction between the visual stuff and the symbolic stuff. And so we can talk about symmetry, and I think symmetry makes sense, right? You can kind of understand how this works in these terms. We can, step 2 would be let's put in some numbers, and step 3 let's put in some variables and see what happens, right? And develop our understanding in this way. But so here we have a question. So what kind of symmetry does this one have? Well, horizontal reflection, right? So now you have to picture, so you can already tell that you're doing spatial stuff at this point, right? Does this have horizontal reflection symmetry? Yes, it does. Okay. Let's look at another one. There's different kinds of symmetries, right? There's vertical, so I put the mirror, vertical reflection symmetry. A lot of times they will show these with footprints. If you go online and look about symmetry, they'll give you the footprints example. So does this one have vertical reflection symmetry? So confirm this, right? And yes, it does. Okay, so I can see this. And then now we can get to rotational symmetries. So those were along an axis. Now we can talk about rotations. And these things, the rule of thumb is if it looks like a fan, it has some kind of rotational symmetry. And two of the big ones that they care about is twofold, which is you turn it around one whole time and twice it looks the same. So that's twofold symmetry. If it looks 4 times the same, it's fourfold symmetry. If it looks 6 times the same, sixfold. So this is a 2-bladed fan, right? A propeller plane, right? An old one might have that. And so here's the idea, right? That these distances on the to the horizontal line have to on both sides be the same, and the vertical, so you can kind of develop an understanding of this that has nothing to do with numbers. And then you can back the numbers into this thing, right? So now let's see. Does this have, I've checked the box already, so you sort of know the answer. But this one here, to see this is a little bit harder, right? Because you have to rotate this all the way around. In fact, I'd say this is the hardest one to see, the 180, the twofold symmetry. If you can't see it, you can always do the math, right? But it's funny, your brain will say, no, I'd rather have the spatial abilities. I don't want to do this math. I don't want to check if this is the line, this is below, then this needs to be above. Your brain is really good at taking care of itself when it comes to this stuff, right? So we have this, and then we would have fourfold symmetry. And so you can explain all of these things, and you can develop an understanding of these visually. And at least one of these SAT questions was a visual one. It had nothing to do with numbers. The second one was numeric. So fourfold symmetry. So if we rotate this guy goes up here. Okay, so yes. So I'm being systematic. I have some larger understanding. I'm not doing it at a brick by brick level and in larger chunks. And so what I'd like to do now, so there's an app on the Bricklayer website that lets you practice this kind of stuff. Okay? And there's more stuff coming. So Bricklayer it's an ecosystem. It's an evolving system. Our to-do list is really, really long. Our team that's working on it is very small, but we're lean and mean. And so it gets better over time, but there's a lot of things that we want to work on. So let me show you this. Whoops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to go here. No. All right, let me go. I thought I had that link put in here. All right, so if you go to the Bricklayer website, and you go to, there's a bunch of apps, and they're self-paced, self-grading kind of apps. So one of them is called Mystique, inspired by the Marvel character who can do the mirror image of who she sees, basically. But so this one here, you're supposed to do create the object that would be created if you did the horizontal reflection of this object. So you have a line that goes down the middle here, reflect the object this way. And the idea is that hopefully, this is sort of a letter H, so you're kind of good at seeing, your brain is good at seeing this as a single entity, right? As opposed to, there are other ones that you could create that are harder to see this way, right? So you can gently get into this, and then you can test it. And if you get it right, you get fireworks, and if you get it wrong, you can try again or see the answer. And so you can walk through these, right? Some of them are fairly simple, or you could do this algorithm, right? You could do the algorithm where I draw the line, and this far below means this far above, and I can do all of this. So you have that as a fallback position, but your brain is just encouraged to please just see the whole thing, right? Please just picture this in your head. But some of them do get harder. So let's do this one. This one's still okay, right? It's like a bicycle pedal. Let's see, we can go to, there's harder ones over here. Let's see if we got, I want to go to level 2, maybe here, pick something. So these guys, so this is horizontal reflection, so now I have to flip it this way. Rotations can get a little trickier. So there's a lot of exercises here, and you can, so now you have to do a 180-degree rotation of this thing. And so they get a little bit harder, and one could make them significantly harder as well, right? So it's a work in progress, but the reason why I created this was I noticed that when kids were programming, like let's say you had a square, and you're supposed to identify the midpoints of each of the sides of the square and somehow connect them with lines and stuff. They would calculate the midpoint of the bottom one and figure this out. This minus, divided in half. And then they would do the same calculation again for the other side. And it's like, well, you don't need to do that. You've already figured it out. You just need to and so they weren't doing that. So I said, okay, so you need to be more sensitive to this stuff. Okay, so that's symmetry. And you can dial this up, like I said. Here's an interesting one. So I want you to complete this, right? So if I tell you that I'm giving you half, so now you need to figure out, okay, so there's 4 across the bottoms. If it's truly symmetric, there's going to be 4 on the other side. We can talk about where the line is, right? Where the line. So maybe I should provide a dotted line that says this is the point of reflection, but it's not quite reflection because of color and stuff, right? So there's some kind of symmetry that's going on. So puzzle this out, right? This is all ultimately numerical reasoning, spatial flexibility kind of stuff. I have a tool that generates these things with symmetry automatically. So I can give you actually like a Qualtrics survey that says, does this have symmetry or not, right? So here's sort of highlights of the symmetries of artifacts that have certain sizes. I can make bigger, I can make them of any size you want and any density and complexity. So here's an interesting one. If I tell you, I'd like you to fill in the minimum number of cells so that what you create has twofold symmetry. It could have other symmetries as a byproduct, and then we could talk about that. Like, is that an accident, or does that always happen, right? But let's just do this twofold symmetry, right? So here, that one goes, and if we want vertical reflection symmetry too. Okay, so vertical reflection means the top one here has to go to the left one here. So now I have all 4 corners filled in, and the game continues, right? It's sort of like a crossword puzzle. So now I figured out this. If this has vertical reflection, then this one goes here, and this one goes here. Then if we have rotational stuff, then it shows up on the bottom. And so anyway, so you can puzzle this out, right? And there's a bunch that you can come up like this, right? So that might be like Mystique's sister. I don't have a name for her yet, but anyway, so I find they're very interesting problems to me. A lot of times when you're coding something in Bricklayer, right, you are saying, I wonder what this would look like, and it's big. It's too big to create by hand, and you go like, should I write a computer program to do that? if I could picture it and it doesn't look good, I'll save myself the trouble. And that's what ends up happening. So that's one kind of area that when you play with stuff, and research has shown, right, that if you play with blocks and any of this kind of stuff, your spatial abilities go up. So another thing that we look at is sequences, so repeating patterns or somehow artifacts that are related to one another in some way. And so there's famous ones, right? I'll show you a famous one at the end of this set of slides here. But so you can come up with tons of them. So here's one. And so the question is, do you see the pattern? Do you see the algorithm for how to create the next one? Were numbers involved, right? Well, numbers, I would say to create A4, you wouldn't need to know a lot about numbers. You just need to sort of recognize stuff. But I could ask stuff that involves numbers, right? How many cells does AN contain? So now all of a sudden we're more, maybe too much for a certain grade, right? So the idea in some sense is to show here in this talk, look, there's this range, and you can tighten the screws as tight as you need to, or loosen them as much as you want to, right? That's sort of the goal. So if I was going to ask you about this AN, how many cells does it contain? Let me tell you, depending on what grade this would be in, let me give you two mathematical facts. One is, if I give you a rectangle, its size, certain dimensions, the number of cells in it is n times m. Okay, so that's one fact. And let me give you another one. And you can ignore the sum at the bottom if you don't like this. But basically for a triangle, it's n times n plus 1 divided by 2. Okay, so you can talk about how you can derive this, how cool all of this is, or you can just say it's just a starting point. It's a magic formula. I'm just telling you, when you see a triangle, this is how many pieces it has in it. So if you do that, then I can figure this one out by can't I just cut it into two triangles? So I have two triangles here, the dark one and the red one. And notice how I have that light gray thing. I kind of filled that in because that's really not part of my pattern. Well, so then I have to subtract 1 off of that. So my two triangles minus 1. So that's a visual decomposition of what's going on here, right? I could have done it a different way. I could figure out the area of the rectangle and cut away the triangles that are not part of this thing, and then also the minus 1 at the bottom. So I'm subtracting two triangles now. And I could look at these things in different ways as well, right? So this one is how it grows from the previous one. And you could do it two ways. You put a layer on the top, or you put a layer on the bottom. And so now, if you want to talk about like numerical flexibility, so this is spatial flexibility. How many different ways can you grow one to create the next one? Is these the only ways to do it, to see this and to break this down? Here's a nice one. Straight chain alkanes, right? So this is real. There's actually an A43 in here, and more. It goes up more. And so then the question is, how many bonds does this thing have? So it's that question, right? So if you want to tie it into stuff like this, you can do things. You can do variations of this, or I have just basically any kind of a repeating pattern. I can say, what's the coordinate of the nth yellow cell here? So more math, less math, how do you go about figuring out these things? The main point of showing all of those really was just, look, that there's this spectrum of stuff that you can play in, right, a space. Another one that I'm developing recently is this visual decomposition. And let me show you how this works. So I'm going to give you a slight drink from the fire hose, but we have this app in Bricklayer that's basically virtual graph paper. So rather than paper and pencil, this is how it started out. It literally started out, we ran out of paper at an event with kids and markers, and the kids started crying. And we go like, we never want to see that happen again. They already had their paper, but they messed it up and they wanted another one, and we were out. And so we said, okay, so let's just do this. But it has evolved over time, and it's getting better. And so one of the things that you can do with this, so let me kind of show you, is you can build something. So whatever you like. I'm building a little elbow thing here, and then you can actually take a picture of it. And now whenever I click, it's going to place one of those, right? So if I click here, and not only that, I can take another picture. And now when I place, it's going to place one of these. And now I can take another picture. And let me make this a little bigger here. And so what this thing here is, this is actually a fractal. So it's a pattern. I can look at the way the mouse clicks were put together to do this thing, and I can look at them at different levels. So each frame has its own color. The white one is the cell by cell that gets repeated. The next one is the, you can look at the different frames. So these are all the frames that so you can look at this. And so ultimately, right, I can give you, depending on, again, this is not elementary school stuff, but I can say, write a function for each one of those clicks, and then put them together in this way at these coordinates. So you can literally trace through your code. It gives you the coordinates where you're supposed to put all this stuff. And now you're supposed to now generalize this to not just starting from the origin, but from an arbitrary point. So you can gradually sort of dial up the level of sophistication of what's going on here. And you can use this tool without the coding component, right? You could just use it as a tool for creating patterns. And how do you create interesting patterns? And so there's some interesting assignments that go on that can be associated with this. And that is, so I give you this. And I say, using frames, using these pictures, create this. And maybe I might say in as few mouse clicks as possible. Something like this. Now, one of the things that you can do is it is possible to overlay. So you can have part of one overlaying the other one, and that'll all work out, so everything's fine. So I could, for example, create these four down here, and then overlay them so that they're overlaying each other on the top and on the bottom. So I could create it that way. Could I have done just these two? Right? So now you're talking about visually decomposing a pattern, right? I could also give it to you the other way around. I want composition now. I'm giving you the piece. From here, build that. And you can, oh, by the way, you can do an undo. So if you get it wrong, you can undo, then try and move it somewhere else. Right, so the question is, can you see the pattern here? Can you see how to place these things? And this is just, so these ideas are really just at the beginning. So this is sort of this semester where I've sort of started playing around with this stuff. But some of these are pretty easy to see how they're overlapping. Some of them are a little bit harder. Here's an interesting one. And it's also interesting to see how they come together, how when you overlap, what kind of other patterns might emerge out of all of this. So from here, you can create that. And you kind of go like, well, okay, so this is going to fit here, and then this is overlapping, and this kind of thing. And so you're picturing stuff all the time, right? All the time you're picturing. You can do a trial by error, but your brain just says, it's too hard. Can I just picture this a little bit and not do so many mouse clicks? All right. Another one. The inclusion-exclusion principle, right? This is Venn diagrams and all this kind of stuff, and it's where you have, the slices of pizza overlaying each other, or the cloth, and how many layers are in the middle and stuff like this. And so you can do these Lego labs. So this is a thing that I'm working at, physical stuff. It's really beneficial to actually have, so at Elkhorn Elementary, they build on Lego base plates, they build something like pixel art, and then they code it up. And I'm a big, big fan of this touching, this tactile stuff, right? So this one here, we all know how many cells are in this cube minus the dark stuff, right? So this is just this 3 by 3 by 3 stuff. And but now I say, suppose there's a tunnel that goes through where you see the dark. And here's my actual physical, this proof I can build one of these things. So how many cells are left? Because these tunnels cross in the middle. Right, so this is this inclusion-exclusion stuff. You can't count them twice. You have to subtract. You take the number of tunnels, then you subtract their intersections and stuff. And but you don't have to. You can just build these Lego things and just figure it out, right? You do kind of, and you can make these things harder, right? So there's one that's a little bit harder. I had to build this, of course, too. I have this as a professor. I was like, don't ever give an assignment that you have not done yourself. So building this in physical Lego is tricky because you have to have the right bricks, and it's sometimes it's just fitting in just the right way. But so I built it, and then I took the picture and I go like, oh my God, I built it wrong. Did I? But did I build it wrong? Well, so if this guy goes through, and you look at it from the other side, from here, then close to the top, close to the top. So no, it turns out that's the view from here. Push this tunnel all the way through, and you see there'll be two dark spots, one below, just like this guy. So it's like, whew, all that work, because it really took me a long time, and I was certain I had gotten this right. I go, I can't believe I got this wrong, and all this work, and I had to find all the Lego bricks that did it. And so they're from different sides now. And so those are actually kind of fun experiments too, right? Can you see this? And so they can get hard, they can get tricky, right? There's no doubt about it, but if you spend time with this, right? And anything with the visual arts develops this kind of stuff, right? So here's one. And I had a nightmare doing this other one, right? So I was like, this is too hard. There's too many holes. I can't get this thing to stand and be connected and stuff. Now there is a tool that Lego connects to, that Bricklayer connects to, that solves what's called the Lego construction problem. So I can actually plug this into this. I can code it up in Bricklayer, send the output to this tool. It's a display tool, and then hit solve, and it will give me build instructions if it's possible. So I don't even have to solve it on my own, but if you want to try to solve it on your own, even the simpler one is not so easy. Try it. The easier one, the one from the previous slide.
Is that one solvable? Right there?
I was rushing to get this done, so I didn't run it through the solver, but I decided to get creative in my solution. So I said, I'm not going to have air in between there. I'm going to have non-yellow bricks. I ran out of black ones on the inside, so I just said, okay, non-yellow, and then I will be able to count up how many non-yellow bricks there are. So now I've solved my problem, right? It is a super fun exercise. It is not so easy to do this. It's harder than you think, but it's way fun. And there's once you see this, there's sort of endless possibilities to this kind of stuff. And ultimately, that stuff, right, gets you into these mental rotations, and those are these well-known international spatial abilities tests, right? This kind of stuff. So I think on that, my time is up. On that note, are there any questions? If anybody's interested in taking Bricklayer to their school or whatever, we do Bricklayer training for free. We do anything we can to help you guys. We're on a mission I have cards. We're on a mission to teach the world to code and to think better and all this kind of stuff. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.